Our next speaker is Mark Carpenter. Mark is a speaker, author, and a serial storyteller. He's on a mission to increase the humanity in corporate leadership, to get people to lead like people rather than positions. In addition to inspiring people from the stage, Mark teaches people how to be more intentional in how they tell stories to teach, lead, sell, and inspire to accomplish business as well as personal goals. He is a co-author of the best-selling book, Master Storytelling: How to Turn Your Experiences into Stories That Teach, Lead, and Inspire. Leveraging a 20-year career in corporate communication, 10 years working as an adjunct professor in communication, and 15 years facilitating training, Mark couples a lively, engaging style with purposeful, impactful learning. His talk today is called Developing People Leaders in the Age of AI. Don't forget, for Mark or for any of our speakers today, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A box and our speaker will respond to you via email with your personalized answer after the summit. Let's give Mark a warm welcome.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. I am thrilled to be speaking to you today. I spent a lot of my time talking with human resources leaders, and particularly about developing new people leaders. We live in such an interesting time in this age of AI. And there's a lot of times people will say, oh, I'm worried that AI is going to take my job. And then other people will say, well, I'm a leader, so AI is not going to take my job because I lead people. What's going to happen is the people who are going to take your job are the people who know how to use AI to help them be better people leaders. At the same time, we can't abdicate our leadership responsibility to AI. So to get into this, I want you to start thinking about your most memorable leaders. I'm going to share my screen here to just kind of prompt that, because notice I didn't say best leader. I just said most memorable. Most memorable usually falls into one of two categories. First, there's the leader you loved. These are the leaders that helped you become who you are today. I think back on my very first people leader when I graduated from college and had my first professional job. 2 years into the job, I was starting to think, okay, maybe in another year I start transitioning to another position, start looking for another job. Well, she came to me and she said, I don't think we're maximizing your potential. I want you to rewrite your job description. I want you to write it like this so it moves you into a higher job category so you can get a raise. Well, I'm not going to leave that leader. That's the leader I loved. And she took great care of me and was just a great people leader. The other category is the leader you left. These are the leaders that you remember with a little bit of trepidation. Maybe your heart starts racing a little bit more when you start thinking about the leaders you left. I had a leader one time, he was the CEO of a small software company, and he wanted me to do something that I thought was questionable, possibly even would create legal problems for us. And when I pushed back, and I didn't push back hard, I just said, I just think this is going to create problems for us. I'm uncomfortable with this. His response was to point at me and say, look, you work for me. I sign your paycheck. That means you have to do what I tell you to do. And yes, that was a leader I left. I resolved this problem. I had to get some other people involved to help us with it. But then I started looking for other jobs. So think about these most memorable leaders. And maybe you have one in each category, the leader you loved and the leader you left. When I talk to people about these two types of leaders, and I ask them, what are the characteristics you remember most about those leaders? Here's what I typically get. And I want you to think about the characteristics that you would put on the leader you loved or the leader you left. Typically, I get responses like this for the leaders you loved. These are the people who listened to me. They supported my growth. They had my best interest at heart. They gave credit to the team. They knew me personally. They cared about me as a person, not just as an employee. Is that about right? Sound familiar? Now, how about the leader you left? Leaders you left, I usually hear almost the opposite. They took all the credit. They never got to know me. They made demands. They only cared about their own needs. They didn't listen to me. They insulted people. That's not that track with you too. Now, here's what I want you to consider. As you look at those two lists, how would you categorize those characteristics or those traits of those leaders, both on the leaders you loved and the leaders you left side? As you look at those, they have nothing to do with how well that person could actually do their job. They have everything to do with how they treated people. And so whether it's the leader you loved or the leader you left, the difference is going to be in how do they treat people. And this is the essence of leadership. For me, leaders who lead with humanity cultivate a culture of belonging that leads to better collective results. And as we're in this day of AI, there are certain portions of that you cannot do with AI. We have to develop leaders who know how to lead like people. And this starts at the front line in an organization. Even though a lot has changed in our day of AI and our technology advancements, we still struggle with developing people leaders. And I think it just goes back to how we've traditionally developed these frontline people leaders. Now, see if this tracks with you and your experience too. Here's what I see and what I find from talking to human resources leaders and also senior leaders in organizations. Think about this. When you've got a team that needs a new leader, who gets promoted into that leadership position? Typically, what I see is it's the individual who has the most experience or maybe the best performance as an individual contributor. And we look at that person and we say, congratulations, you are now the new leader. So they come to this point where they have this leadership opportunity. And we take this individual contributor and we put them into a leadership position. Now, those two criteria that I mentioned, they've been there the longest or they're the best individual contributor. Do those criteria make someone a good people leader? Now, a lot of times I get a reflex answer from people on that they say, no. And the answer is maybe, maybe not. But it's kind of hit or miss. And so knowing that this person has different responsibilities as we put them into a leadership position, we want to give them some training. We want to develop them. So think about the kind of training that new leader typically gets, either in your organization or in organizations you've worked with in the past. My experience is that this best team member that goes into the leadership opportunity typically gets new skills training around these types of areas: policy, process, systems, structure. Here's the meetings you have to go to. Here's the processes to follow, whether you're putting someone on discipline or you're hiring someone. We get them into these very process-oriented types of skills. But fundamentally, what's the biggest change in their new job? It's leading people. But we're not giving them new people skills. And that actually might work out for them for a while. In times that are good, that usually works out okay. But when that leader faces an obstacle, a leadership challenge, those skills aren't sufficient. And then they start leaning back on their position skills. And that's how you get leaders who say, you work for me, you do what I tell you to do. That's where you get leaders who create problems like high turnover, low productivity, poor morale, and really bad engagement, lack of engagement with their teams. And that's what creates costly challenges within the organization. Now, this isn't just my perspective. Let me give you a couple of research examples that illustrate this point as well. This was a study done by Crucial Learning recently, and they called it Confessions of New People Managers. So they interviewed a lot of people and talked about when you were a first-time people leader. How did you feel? And only 8% felt that they were adequate going into that new role. Now, that shouldn't be too surprising. You take on a new responsibility like leadership, you probably don't feel adequate, especially right up front. It probably feels a little overwhelming and intimidating. But then we asked them, what kind of training did you get? 37% said, I got no training at all. I got nothing. I just got dumped into this role. Another 15% said they got some training, but it was inadequate for them to feel successful in their role. And so that's more than half. If you look at the no training at all and inadequate training, that's more than half of these leaders. Now, there's another study by InfoPro Learning that illustrates this point as well. In the study, they asked, how many of you believe that it's important to develop leaders at all levels in your organization? Now, I want you to think of a percentage. What percentage of this 1,000+ people that were interviewed said, yes, I believe it's important to develop leaders at all levels in our organization? Okay, got your number locked in? Here's what they came up with, 83%. Now, I thought that was a little low, actually. I'm thinking some of your numbers might have been higher than that. I worry about that 17% of companies that said, no, I don't believe that's important. But the telling part of this is they next asked them, how many of you actually have leadership development at all levels in your organization? Now, same thing, lock into a number. What percentage of these organizations who said, 83% of them, that we believe it's important to have leadership development at all levels, what percentage of those organizations actually had leadership development at all levels? The number that came up was 5%. That might be lower than you expected. It was lower than I expected when I initially looked at this research. And so that's the gap. There's a gap between knowing and doing. We know that these leaders need new skills, but we don't put in place leadership development programs, particularly that lead people to get people skills as they're leading people. And this is why people fall back to leading like a position, because they don't have the people skills to lead like a person. There's a great quote from an ancient Greek poet named Archilochus. He said this, "We do not rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training." Think of that. We do not rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. So when people move into a new leadership position and they don't get training on how to lead people, what do they fall back on? They fall back on their position. Here's another way that that comes up. You get a new leader who has a team member who comes to them with an issue or a problem, and they just jump in and fix it themselves as the leader. Because, hey, I know how to do your position, and that's what I know, and so that's how I'm going to fix this problem. But then it doesn't develop people, and it creates problems within organizations. Now, I want you to think about what kind of problems that can create. Not just that specific instance, but what kind of problems does it create when we have people who lead more like a position than a person? There was a study done by McKinsey and Company where they asked people, why did you leave your last job? Now, as you look at these percentages, you will see they add up to more than 100%. And that's because they could give multiple reasons. But as you look at the reasons that people gave, and this may be a little small on your screen, so let me just hit them really quickly. 41% said it was lack of career development or advancement opportunities. 36% inadequate compensation. 34% uncaring leaders. 31% lack of meaningful work. 29% unsustainable expectations. Lack of health and well-being was 26%, and the same number for unreliable people and lack of flexibility. As you think about those reasons that people leave a job, how many of those can be impacted by their direct manager, by their direct leader? I would suggest most of them. Most of these issues are people leadership issues. So it costs organizations when we don't have leaders who lead like a person and who instead lead like a position. Now let's get into the AI side of this, because I went out and asked the question and did several different searches on this. What are the most important skills for new leaders to have? And I focused it on new leaders. And I came back with a long list and a lot of overlapping things, and I created a word cloud with it. This is the word cloud that came up. Now, if you don't know how word clouds work, words that are repeated more get a larger showing on the word cloud. So clearly on this one, communication was the top skill that came out in that. But look at all these skills on the list here. I'm just going to let you glance through that with the thought process of how many of these are people skills rather than position skills. Consider that. How many of these are people skills rather than position skills? I would suggest most of them, and particularly the ones that are large. Now, I know there are some of these that are small enough that they were only mentioned once, and so you can't even read what those were. But the ones that are in the bigger typeface, those all have to do with people skills. And we can't, I get it. I get it. As an HR leader, you can't just say, all right, we're going to take months of training for this person to get them developed as a people leader. And so I would suggest that most of these skills can be highly impacted by developing 3 people skills with new leaders: listening intently, communicating intentionally, and recognizing individually. These are skills that require humans to do them. We cannot relegate those to technology, but technology can help with those skills. Okay, let me give you a couple of examples. What I'd like to suggest is we need to have leaders that are somewhat cyborg leaders. Now, what's a cyborg? A cyborg is a combination of human and technology. So AI can help leaders to develop their people skills. It can help people strengthen their people skills if they're used correctly. Again, we don't relegate leadership to AI, but can it help especially new leaders develop some of those leadership skills? I went into one of the ChatGPT type of programs, and I put in the situation that I mentioned earlier about my CEO and I disagreeing on an issue. And the issue was whether or not we should communicate a product feature before we had it developed. And my side was, no, we shouldn't, because we don't even know if we can develop this yet. And his side was, this is going to make us look better in the market. And when I pushed back, that's where he said, you do what I tell you because I sign your paycheck. So I went into a chat GPT and I typed in, I've got this issue with my communications manager. I'm the CEO and I think we should announce this. He thinks we shouldn't. What should I do about this? And it gave me a long list of wonderful suggestions. Now, AI can't follow through on those suggestions, but it said things like, think in terms of his perspective. Why do you think he's thinking that we shouldn't? And what's the best solution? Now, it also gave a script of how to talk about it. And I read the script and I went, if my leader had said that to me, I would have gone, what are you trying to do? Because this is not you. And so that's where AI becomes a danger to us. We don't want leaders to say, I'm going to let AI speak for me, because it will come across as false. It will come across that you're the robot, not the human part of the cyborg. Here's another example. I talked to a leader a few months ago, and we were talking about AI, and he said, AI has saved me so much grief in my communication with my team. And he was a senior level leader in his organization. He had gotten criticized for being harsh in his email communications. And he had a lot of times where he had to email broad groups. And so he started taking his emails, he'd write them, and then he would put them into a large language model and say, make this more palpable for people to hear without decreasing the content and without taking away my voice. And it would come back and give suggestions, and he would eliminate the things that were very clearly AI, like starting with, I hope you're having a great day. That's one of those things that it seems like it comes up in every email communication. But he started training his AI to be his voice, but in a little more not less, or a little less directive way, I should say. Okay. And he said, this has helped me become a better communicator because I've learned what are the words that I'm using that are coming out too harsh. And more as I've trained AI, I'm making fewer and fewer changes that I have to make because it's learning my voice, but I'm also learning this is how to communicate better. And so there are opportunities, I think, where leaders can learn to communicate better using AI. The thing we have to do is be very intentional about using AI in leadership. There are certain things that AI can do. There are certain things AI should not be doing. On the do side, AI is great for research. It's great for that idea that I mentioned earlier. How should I address this with my team member? You can get some good ideas because you're tapping into volumes of leadership research over the decades and leadership counsel and advice. It's great for sharing ideas. Help me brainstorm around this issue. And it's great for editing copy. That's the example that I used of the email. But here's what AI should not be used for. It goes back to my 3 principles. AI cannot listen for you. And listening is one of the things that always comes up on the leaders that I loved. When I ask people about those leaders that they loved, listening is always very close to the top of the list. You cannot get AI to do that. You have to learn that yourself. It's a skill. It's a skill that I teach all the time. It can't completely communicate for you. It can help you with your communication. It can support your communication. But don't use AI as I'm just going to say, AI, send out this email for me that communicates this topic. That will get you in trouble. The other part of communicating intentionally, as I refer to it, is you've got to be able to tell stories that teach, lead, and inspire. You've got to be able to communicate in a form that helps people understand the why, not just the what. And storytelling is a leadership skill that helps you to do that. I have seen people try to use AI to tell stories or to develop stories, and it does it poorly. It's getting better, but it loses its authenticity because AI did not experience the experience that you're relating. And so that one needs to be the human side. And the other one is recognizing people for the good work they do. Now, I think AI could support that, but you have to know your people well enough to know how they appreciate being recognized. So I could go into an AI and say, hey, I've got a person who values this and they've done this. I want to make sure that I recognize them appropriately. What are some options of how I could do that? And so that goes back to sharing ideas or doing some research with AI. But it can't do the recognition of people. And if you want people to stay with you, you need to recognize the good work they're doing. This is part of the problem in the training that we give. We train people on how do you discipline. We don't train people on how do you recognize the good work. And so again, back to the Archilochus quote, we fall back to what we know and we start looking for ways people are doing things wrong, but we fail to recognize the good work we're doing. But that is leading like a person. That is going to retain people. It's going to get you the best work out of those people. Okay? So just to wrap up, use AI intentionally for what it's designed for. But don't try to use it to lead people because people need people leaders. People crave personal interaction. They crave being seen as people. And AI can replicate that, but it can't do it like a person. So as you're developing your people leaders, think about how you can develop those skills, listening intently, communicating intentionally, recognizing people individually to help drive more people leadership within your organization. Now, as I wrap up here, I'd like to share with you a free resource that I have available. I've identified 5 mistakes that we make in developing new people leaders and how to avoid them. This comes in 3 different formats. And so if you'll scan the QR code, it leads you to a Google form that you can say, yes, I want the resource. And you tell me what format you want it in. I've got a 2-page overview that goes into some details. I've got an infographic that's just 1 page. It's a shorter summary. And then there's a 5-minute video that explains these 5 mistakes that we make and how we avoid them. So if you would like that, scan the QR code there and let me know. I will get that to you. You're also welcome to reach out to me and connect with me. My email address there is at the bottom, mark@leadlikeaperson.com. I do a lot of work helping HR leaders and new leaders develop these skills, but also senior leaders to understand these skills so they can develop them in their new leaders. You're also welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn as my social platform. There's a lot of Mark Carpenters out there, but if you can remember this face, there's only one with this face. And so look for Mark Carpenter, and there will be a background that has people need people leaders connected with me as well. So final thought, developing people leaders isn't just about getting better work or getting more out of people. It's really about laying the foundation for a legacy of purpose and positive impact. It's about creating more of the leaders that we love and fewer of the leaders that we leave, and having the positive benefits that come when people are leading people like people. So take advantage of the AI tools that are out there to help develop that people leadership, but make sure you're focused on people leading people. I have one more chance at the QR code there. And I just want to thank you for listening in. Appreciate the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you today, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much to our speaker, Mark Carpenter, for his presentation today, Developing People Leaders in the Age of AI. Don't forget to get that free resource that he's sharing with you using the QR code shown in the slide. And if you're looking to partner with Mark, his website is leadlikeaperson.com. Thank you again, Mark Carpenter. Let's move on to our next speaker.